Hi, this should be a short one. We're just going to talk about the nervous system a little bit and then we'll be done. So let's see, let's go right here. Okay, so let's take a look at the nervous system, and what you might want to do is it may help you if you draw this somewhere in the margin. So notice we've got the nervous system and we've got two over here. So we've got the peripheral. Now stop for a second, everybody stop drawing. When you think of something that's on the periphery, where is it? It's on the outside, right? So we have the central, which runs right down the middle, your brain and spinal cord. And then we have your peripheral, and I hope you can see it. It's yellow. It's all this stuff that's on the outside. So the peripheral nervous system is on the outside, on the outskirts of your body. Central is running right down the middle. So we got the brain and spinal cord for the central, and it kind of stops there. We go to the peripheral, and there are two parts. There's the autonomic and the somatic. Now we've already dealt with somatic, and stop again for a second. Soma means body. We talked about that from the cell body on the neuron. So the somatic nervous system is you move your hands, you move your feet, anything that you're moving in your body, that's your somatic nervous system. That even your face is your somatic nervous system. It's part of your body. And then there's the autonomic. And I want you to think of the autonomic as automatic. And you might even want to write that down, and maybe circle autonomic and draw a little arrow and say automatic. This is stuff that you can't control. So in other words, if I said to you right now, I want you to increase your heart rate, you couldn't do it. I mean, if I said, I want your heart rate to go up 50%, you can't control that. It's automatic. If I said, digest your food faster, you couldn't do that because it's not something that's in your control. Your somatic is within your control. Your autonomic isn't. So anything that is self-regulated action, and again, think of digestion, think of heart rate. If I said, increase your blood pressure or decrease your blood pressure, you couldn't do that. So any of those examples, please write those in the margin for your autonomic nervous system. Now, in here, you can't quite see at the bottom, and I'm sorry. So if you see sympathetic and parasympathetic, this right here is really going to help you with your mnemonics. So when you think of para, I want you to think of parachute. Okay, so think of a parachute if you go parachuting. So your sympathetic shoots you up into the air. So your sympathetic nervous system, if I take a swing at you, then your sympathetic nervous system kicks in. So your adrenaline goes in. And again, you can't control your adrenaline. That's why it's autonomic. You can't control your adrenaline. So if I take a swing at you, your autonomic nervous system kicks in, cortisol, adrenaline, all that stuff kicks in. So the sympathetic shoots you up, and it says down here, you can't quite see it, says arousing. And then, and you know as well as I do, if you've ever been into a fight, if you've ever gotten into a car crash or anything like that, afterwards you're still kind of shaking and you're still kind of pumped up, and you couldn't go to sleep if you tried. So your parasympathetic is the part of your nervous system that brings you back down slowly like a parachute. So there are two parts of the automatic or autonomic nervous system. The sympathetic shoots you up in the air. And I know it seems like sympathetic. Maybe, I mean, I'm trying to think of a mnemonic for sympathetic. Why would it be sympathetic? So if you see a terrible car crash and you feel sympathy for somebody, or you see a fight and it kind of gets you up, the reason you're feeling that way is you feel sympathy toward this person. So it shoots you up in the air, and then the parasympathetic. And it takes a while. You know as well as I do. Sometimes it's deep breathing exercises, any of that other stuff, because it just takes a while to bring you back down. So two parts of the nervous system, central and peripheral. So we have the center and the peripheral on the outside. In the peripheral, we have our body, and we have our guts, basically our heart, our stomach, all that stuff. And we have things that bring us up with the sympathetic and bring down with the parasympathetic. If you need more time to write this down, Ms. Schabold can pause it. If you're all written it down, then let's move on. Why is this? Okay. So with central nervous system, the spine and the brain. The spine controls reflexes. There are some things in our body that are too important for it to go to our brain. As we were talking about earlier, it takes time for neural impulses to travel. So there are some things, like if you are burned on a hot stove, a lot of times your hand will come away from that hot stove before the message even gets to your brain. That message gets to your spinal column says, we have no time to send this to your brain. We're just going to move it back out and pull it away. So all of your reflexes are just in your spine. They don't go up to your brain. Any voluntary movement is in your brain. We talked about the peripheral being the outside and the peripheral nervous system. It is the delivery service. The peripheral nervous system is the delivery service for the central nervous system. The somatic nervous system, soma equals body. We talked about that. It is controlled by the motor cortex. You'll be learning about the motor cortex maybe the next day of class or the day after. Your motor cortex, we're going to talk about it. Isn't this wonderful? Hi, everybody. It's this area right here. It's right on top of your brain. In fact, it's about, motor cortex is about where the headphone thing is right now. So if that's a good visual for the motor cortex, great. And then we talked about afferent, things that go out, things that go in your sensory nervous system. So afferent neurons go from your hand to your brain, and then efferent motor neurons get the F out, send information out to your hands. Autonomic is independent. There's no conscious, it says no consciousness, but you know what I mean. No conscious, there's nothing conscious that can make you control that. It's all unconscious. It's controlled by a lot of your brainstem, and we're going to look at the brainstem later, a lot of your autonomic nervous system. It's not up here. This is really your deep thinking. Brainstem is back here. Sympathetic arouses. Parasympathetic brings you back down. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the endocrine system. This is chemical messages sent throughout your body, and the big one in your endocrine system is your pituitary gland. This produces a lot of hormones. It influences the secretions of all the other endocrine glands, and you can't really see it, but I'll point to it. It's right there. It's this tiny little gland, and basically what's going on right there is that's about where your brain meets your body. So this pituitary gland is really important. It really, you might want to underline, it's the master gland. If you have pituitary problems, you're going to have problems with a lot of other parts of your body. It produces human growth hormone, which makes you grow. Some people, adults, have been taking it as kind of a life hack, or a biohack, but it doesn't work. I mean, there are a lot of other problems that go along with it. And I think we've talked about oxytocin, but maybe not. Oxytocin is the love hormone. And basically, like when a mom has a baby, she releases oxytocin. When a mom is breastfeeding a baby, she releases oxytocin. It bonds us to people. I think we've talked about the dark side of oxytocin. If not, I'll talk about it later. It's not something we need to talk about now. But oxytocin, so, you know, if you can't grow, you can't bond to somebody without your pituitary gland. And then we've got the hypothalamus, which is part of your brain. So it goes, this is really important. Hypothalamus is in your brain. Pituitary gland is in your body. So this is where your brain and your body sort of meet hormonally. So your pituitary gland, again, is really important. It's where your brain meets your body. And you might want to write that down in the margin too. The pituitary gland is where your brain meets your body. All right. We also have the pineal gland, which releases melatonin. Some of you have already talked to you about. You take melatonin in order to sleep. When the sun goes down, melatonin starts to be released, and it's what helps us get to sleep. And if you're not releasing melatonin, or if you're doing like day shift work or night shift work, and your sleep schedule's off, it's probably because of melatonin. And there are actually little cells in your eye that they don't see, they just sense light. So they know that when it's light, you don't release melatonin. When it's dark, you do. And that's why when they talk about the blue light from your phone, it's tricking your eyes into thinking it's light out, so you're not releasing melatonin. So that's why blue light is a problem. You're looking at your phone, the light things in your eyes say, oh, so it must be light out, and then you're not releasing melatonin and you can't sleep. Adrenal glands, we talked about adrenaline, which is epinephrine. We talked about that with norepinephrine and neurotransmitters, and cortisol. When they're testing you for chronic stress, and we're going to talk about this later, but stress is not bad. Stress is good. If you didn't have stress, you wouldn't be up for a game. You wouldn't be up for your presentation. Stress is good. Stress gets us ready for events. The kind of stress that's bad is the stress that you always have, the stress that you always feel. So cortisol is a stress hormone that will test you for stress. If you have too much cortisol going through your body, it's really bad for your body. It breaks down. Now, a little bit, like before a football game, whatever, yeah, great. But if you're just sitting watching TV and you have a lot of cortisol going through your body, that's bad. Obviously, we have glands and hormones, testosterone for men. Women have a little bit of testosterone, estrogen for women. Men have a little bit of estrogen. Those are obviously hormones that affect your psychology and your physiology. We have a thyroid. If you had thyroid problems, you're going to have metabolism problems. I don't know if you've ever needed to know thyroxine, but you might need to know that the thyroid, if you have low thyroid function, you're probably going to be gaining weight. You're going to be very sluggish. If you have a very active thyroid, you're probably going to have a hard time keeping weight on because your metabolism is just going through the roof. Then we have the pancreas. Some people in this room might know somebody who is diabetic. So your pancreas releases insulin, which regulates blood sugar. So if you've ever been hangry, that's a problem with insulin. It increases, so as you have food in your body, is your blood sugar too high? If that's a problem, you have diabetes. If it's too low, you're probably very hangry. And there's a whole new science of what you should eat in order to have your blood sugar levels at the proper level. So basically what they're saying is you shouldn't be eating refined sugar, processed food, because it spikes your blood sugar really bad, and then it'll just make you crash really hard. So you want to try to regulate your blood sugar and make it more even. And then this is probably more complex than I'd like to get into without me being there. So I'm just going to stop here on the brain scans, and I think we'll be, I think we're done with this for now.